All right, Lori, I think that we are ready to get started. So if you would like to go ahead and launch the webinar, please do. And everyone who doesn't yet know Lori, this is Lori Scott, our Vice President for Technology and Partnerships. And Lori will tell you a little bit about herself and what we'll be looking at today. So Lori, take it away.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I am glad to be here today to take a closer look at the technology of the past, present, and future of NatureServe's technology programs. I'm really grateful for your participation and support of our mission, and excited to show you some of the tools that we build to support the conservation of biodiversity. And I haven't seen all the names of those who've signed in, but I recognize some familiar ones. So a number of you are possibly more expert in some of these tools than I am because you're working in the network. So hopefully you'll get as much out of this as everyone else. So without further ado, I just first want to make sure everyone is familiar with NatureServe and our mission, which is to leverage the power of science, data, and technology to guide biodiversity conservation. We are the authoritative source of data on threatened and endangered species and their habitats. And as such, we focus on science and information delivery, not advocacy. And this makes us the widely trusted source of data, and that is used by government and industry alike. So the most unique aspect or attribute of NatureServe is the network. And many of you are part of that, so thank you. We have more than 1,000 scientists across North America. We have worked together for 50 years to collect, analyze, and distribute detailed scientific information about more than 100,000 species and ecosystems that pinpoint what exists, where it's found, and how it's doing. This map represents the footprint of the NatureServe network today, and I'm going to cover a little bit about how it began and how we got here. So the design of NatureServe's network and its technology systems began back in the 1970s. Shown here is Dr. Larry Morse, one of the founders of this movement. So we are the world's first biodiversity information network, and we pioneered technological advances in biodiversity data management standards and software. I was a college graduate, recent college graduate in 1988 when the BCD system, shown at the lower right, first came online, and believe it or not, it was still in use when I began my career with NatureServe in 2000. This was the system that I was trained on in what we call core heritage methodology, and we just had the most recent annual core methodology training a few weeks ago, where which we've continued to update every year as new standards, methods, and tools come online. This is the first version of NatureServe Explorer that launched in 2000, which happens to be the same year I joined NatureServe. And it was a pretty exciting launch to get all this data out to the public as widely as the website NatureServe Explorer could allow. Before that, the main way people accessed the collection of data we had was through printed reports. So obviously the era of the internet was a real game changer for getting our data and information into more hands. NatureServe is essentially a biodiversity information network. And this diagram illustrates the core building blocks of how we operate. So going from left to right, we have foundational data on species and ecosystems. That includes a consistent taxonomy and ecosystem classification scheme for North America, which is no small undertaking, and conservation status ranks that indicate which species and ecosystems are most imperiled. We also aggregate biodiversity location data from our network and other trusted partners. The element occurrence, which many of you are familiar with, but those who aren't, that's the sort of standard we use as a network for documenting locations that have practical conservation value. Recently, we've expanded our mapping to include model distributions that better predict where imperiled species might occur. And powering all of this is a robust suite of conservation tools that support the entire data lifecycle, from the collection to analysis and visualization and reporting. So this is our data to decisions lifecycle. It's included in our strategic plan to illustrate the way we deliver high quality, comprehensive data that supports the conservation of biodiversity. I'm going to walk through some of the technology solutions that we've developed to support each stop along this life cycle. So our technology team designs, builds, and integrates solutions for our network partners. They're our primary customer, if you will. And the way we work together is very collaborative. We co-develop the tools that are needed and unique for the NatureServe methodology. And the life cycle from data to decisions is a process that begins with the collection of field data, and it ends with the conservation actions, with steps along the way to curate data, calculate information, and communicate knowledge, all enabled through collaboration with our network partners throughout North America. Underpinning these steps are those integrated technology solutions that are powered by NatureServe. So on the first step for that life cycle are tools to collect biodiversity data. For this step, we do not reinvent the wheel. We leverage and configure out-of-the-box tools. This is an example of an observation collection tool that's configured using Esri software called Survey 123. You might be familiar with popular apps like eBird and iNaturalist that enable citizen scientists to capture observations. Well, we developed similar tools that allow our network of professional biologists to capture really detailed data in the field that conforms to the established standards used across the continent. So this diagram illustrates the process of NatureServe's observation toolkit. So starting at the top, we, the hallmark of our network really is using standard data and methods to ensure that we have consistent data that can be aggregated and analyzed for maximized conservation impact. So our observation toolkit, again, it uses Esri Survey 123 and ArcGIS Online. It makes it easy for network partners to deploy field collection tools that use any of the standard observation fields. Each partner can download the standard survey, and then they customize it to meet their local needs. So they can pick and choose among that standard collection of fields. Then using ArcGIS Online, state partners can manage the observation data that has been collected. They can QC and improve the data, and then publish it out to their own state web mapping applications. And then through a data exchange process, NatureServe aggregates the species location data from our partners and publishes out through NatureServe Explorer. After we collect the data, we manage and curate it. Biotics is the primary system that we are using to aggregate and collaborate on biodiversity data sets across the network. It's a common operating platform for all network programs to manage data on threatened and endangered species and ecosystems. The current Biotics 5 system runs on the web and has evolved through about one major revision every decade since the first computerized systems in the 1970s that I showed a few slides ago. So we're already got our sights on the next generation, which we will call Biotics 6, and that will be designed to run in the cloud. And completing it is among the highest priorities of our 5-year strategic plan. Other aspects beyond just cloud enabling Biotics 6 that are part of our goals include really keeping up with evolving scientific needs. So I mentioned taxonomic reconciliation is a challenge that we wrestle with. So are there faster and better and more efficient ways we can do that? Also, conservation status ranking. Can we ramp up the scale at which, the ease with which we can assess more species so that we can really keep up with the dynamic, volatile, changing threats that our species are facing? So moving on to calculate, there's many ways we analyze the data that we collect to add value and create derived products. One example are the tools we build for modeling species habitat ranges using machine learning to develop predictive models that indicate where species are likely to be found. Predictive habitat models help fill in the blank spaces where we have not yet documented species through field surveys. It's a big continent and we can't get everywhere. So what we've done is built this cloud-based modeling environment that allows us to produce habitat models at scale for thousands of at-risk species. This shared modeling hub brings together documented occurrence data and a library of high-resolution predictor layers that characterize soil, climate, land cover, and other environmental conditions in those locations where the species are known to occur. Then we use machine learning tools like random forest to predict where else in the landscape these species may occur. This process is dynamic. When we have predictions, those can be used to guide where to go for new field surveys efforts, and new data from those efforts can be used to rerun and improve the model. So it's a dynamic process. This is our species habitat model review tool, also built using Esri ArcGIS Online. It supports the collaborative review of those models. It allows species experts to view the model outputs, compare them to their own occurrence data, adjust thresholds used to define habitat, and send comments back to the modeling team. We're successfully using this tool to gather feedback from hundreds of experts across our network to continuously improve the quality and confidence of our collaboratively developed species habitat models. This short video clip that's been running is showing the tool in action. It shows how easily the reviewer can zoom in, closely inspect the model, adjust thresholds, submit a rating, and suggest areas of the model to change. So next stop is communicate. And our flagship tool here is to communicate our science with those who need it and make decisions on the ground is NatureServe Explorer. Today, NatureServe Explorer remains the primary public access tool that has been a trusted resource for over 20 years since it first launched in 2000. Explorer is widely used by federal, state, and provincial governments, as well as industry users. On the left, we see Explorer's advanced search interface, which allows users to search by location, taxonomic group, and conservation status. On the right, we see Explorer Pro, which allows users to access enhanced mapping tools that have allow you to explore an area, discover which species have been documented or predicted to occur there. So it's a more map-centric tool, whereas Explorer, the original Explorer, is more of a database search tool. Together, these tools provide open access to the big data that is maintained by the NatureServe network. So using Explorer's search tools, you can easily learn about any species or ecosystem that we track. This is Pine's ground plum. It's a rare plant named after Milo Pine, the person you see here. He was a NatureServe ecologist based in North Carolina until he retired a few years ago. And this species is really at the front line in the triage hospital. It's assessed as a G1 critically imperiled plant, and it's only found in one part of Tennessee. So we have this conservation status ranking system, and across the top of any species page in Explorer, you see where that species is assessed from G1 on the left to G5 on the right. So from more imperiled to more secure. And we have a very rigorous approach for doing these conservation status assessments that's repeatable and reliable and peer-reviewed. And so it's really one of the critical pieces of information that is relied upon by so many sectors of society. This video is going to demonstrate how you will find the species on Explorer. So right from the home page, you can just start typing a scientific or common name, and the list of options will guide you to your selection. When you get to the page for that species, at the top, you'll see scientific and common name. You see that conservation status. You also see a map of its known distribution. You can toggle that switch, and view not just what states it occurs in, but where our scientists have documented the species to occur. And then scrolling down the page or using the table of contents, you can find more information from our database. So in the conservation status section, you can get more information about, behind the G1 rating. In this case, it notes that only 12 populations remain and some of these are threatened. Here's that table of contents where you can just jump straight to a section that interests you. And in every record, you will find detailed with specific references that back up the science behind our data. Here's a little look at how you can use the advanced search options. So you can combine criteria for location, status, or classification. So in this example, I'm searching on native species that occur in Virginia and that are ranked as G1 by checking the G1 box there. And then on classification, you can search just for animals, or you can open that tree and go down and search even finer in the taxonomic categories. So you can scroll through the results of over 100 in this case of G1 ranked native animals in Virginia. And then when you find one you're interested in, you can just jump to open its page. Here's a mussel that occurs in 3 states, including Virginia. So here, going back to the Explorer homepage, everything that I just showed is completely free, no login required. But we have this new tool, Explorer Pro, so you can see the menu across the top where you can jump over to Explorer Pro. And to do that, you will just create a free account. And there, as I noted, you'll access enhanced mapping tools. There's also a prominent search bar in the middle of the page to invite you to go and search on the Explorer Pro map. So here's what you'll find when you land in Explorer Pro. So right off the bat, you're getting a sense of the scope of data that NatureServe has maintained with its network. So this view is giving you the relative density of documented species. So the larger the circle, the higher the number of species that occur in that location. You can click on any of those cells and pop up a window with more details. So in this location, there are 79 documented species, of which 25 are animals and 54 are plants. Just like we did over in Explorer, you can drill into a single species as well within Explorer Pro. So here's the golden-cheeked warbler. It's a G2 globally imperiled bird. It's found only in Texas. And Explorer Pro is providing expanded access to our maps in finer detail than is available in Explorer. So here's an example of how we are developing and delivering those precision maps and habitat models to our agency partners in the BLM or the Forest Service or Department of Defense. I mentioned earlier that our data are used by government, agency, and industry. Primarily in the government, we often find need for these detailed data by land managing agencies, also the regulators, as well as industry and the regulated community, so that people can comply with endangered species and other regulations. These models are filling the gaps of where we think species occur. So you can see in this view, there are sort of these hexagon-shaped areas are a summary of the occurrences that have been mapped out in the field. But the green areas from dark green to light green show the areas of high, medium, or low probability habitat. So it's filling in some of that white space between and among the confirmed locations with predicted, levels of habitat suitability. And these models are, like I said, filling in the white space, and it's also leading to new discoveries and helping government and industry, guide better decisions. So this video demonstrates how you can traverse from a species page in Explorer over to Explorer Pro. I'm using that golden-cheeked warbler example again. So here we land on Explorer. We see the map of the golden-cheeked warbler, and right there on the map, you see that link to view over in Explorer Pro. So if you just follow that, it takes you on over. It opens up that distribution map, and you can zoom in and get a closer look. And when we have a habitat model available for the species, it'll automatically load for users who have access to that data. Currently, we're only sharing models at their native resolution with certain organizations under data license. But coming in the future release, we plan to also share models at an appropriate resolution with the public. Here you can open up the details and get that information about what confidence rating we've assigned to the model. Remember, I showed the model review tool where we gather that information from our expert reviewers. And you can click through to read really detailed metadata behind the model to give you a real sense of confidence in what went into making the model and what uses would be appropriate for a model given that confidence score. So we have a story map that introduces more of the details of how to use Explorer Pro, and I'm just gonna run through what that story map shows you. So basically, as you scroll through, it provides a little animation of how it works. So you can add a different layer into the tool that you might want to use to analyze an area of interest. You can also draw an area on the map and run a report. I'll come up in a second here where you've done that area of interest, you run biodiversity report, and you can view all the species that are bound to occur there. Here's an example of how you can take one of those layers you added and run a report for a feature found in that layer. In this case, just 5 species were found along that segment of pipeline. Or you can zoom into the details for a single species. In this case, it's the painted turtle. And you can see how you zoom in some locations, you can get really fine scale details. We work with our partners in the network, and they decide at what scale it's appropriate to share a given species. And here you can see how you can jump over to local websites from our state's partners. In this case, it's the Virginia Natural Heritage Data Explorer. And at the bottom of the story map, there's a tutorial video, as well as a case study of how the Bureau of Land Management is using these data. And it closes with a link to start exploring. So the last stop on our data to decision lifecycle is conserve. It's arguably the most important one. So we want to make sure this information is being used to conserve biodiversity. So I'm going to show some examples of how we're doing that. So we just saw how Explorer Pro is an online tool for delivering NatureServe biodiversity location data for all states and provinces. Explorer Pro is also connecting users directly to state online tools that provide additional information and guidance for reducing conflicts and impacts. We have the NatureServe environmental review tool that is doing this in more than a dozen states. You can see which states have implemented this tool in the map here. It's using one core platform, and we've worked with state agencies to configure that and customize the tool to meet their unique regulatory workflows for their state. And these state decision tools are providing information for really deeper project planning and review. Each state can bring into the tool its unique information layers and configure the tool to analyze areas that a project proponent will submit and give back very targeted guidance on recommendations for how to proceed, how to avoid conflict, how to minimize impact on at-risk species. These tools really save time and money for both the agency and the project review applicants. Using Pennsylvania as an example, the Pennsylvania Conservation Explorer, it reviews over 25,000 projects annually, and the majority of those projects screened result in no conflict or return voluntary conservation and avoidance measures. And that really saves time and money for everyone concerned. It allows the state staff to focus greater effort on projects with higher risk. And it's a real boon for the applicants too, which in the past, under a more manual system, might have to wait weeks or even months to get a response back. As well, the tool really is helping agency staff by allowing them to administrative access to maintain much of the content themselves. So it really provides a flexible system for them to adjust new data layers as they're needed to be brought in, or change up what the decision rules are affecting a project review, consultation, and analysis. And it also provides dashboards so that agency staff can view the status of projects over time across the state, or by project type. One of the top threats to imperiled species is the proliferation of invasive species that prey on or outcompete native species. So we worked closely with network partners in a number of US and Canadian jurisdictions to develop IMAP invasives. It's a complete system for tracking invasive species and guiding management actions. We're using one shared platform across those jurisdictions that can aid early detection and response. It's also much more cost effective, having everyone share one tool. So you share the cost of building it and operating it. This system includes mobile reporting tools that the state staff can use, and it also can mobilize citizen scientists to serve as an army of sensors, providing real-time feedback to natural resource professionals. Here's some statistics that just came out for the 2022 year, the annual report from IMAP Invasives Network. You can see a little bit about how much data was added last year and by which method, and by species type. So I want to close with one more example of how NatureServe is communicating information to conserve biodiversity. Last month, we released this really impactful report, Biodiversity in Focus, United States edition. The link to get a full version of the report is shown at the bottom here. In this report, we ask 5 essential questions about the state of biodiversity in the US, and we provide spatial data to inform national conservation efforts like 30 by 30. So the first question we answer is, how many species and ecosystems are at risk? And as you can see, the answers are pretty concerning. Over 1/3 of species and ecosystems in the US are at risk of disappearing. And the report goes into a lot of detail, breaking that down by individual groups of plants and animals and types of ecosystems. So within the plant category, we see that almost half of cactus species and about 200 tree species and nearly 1 in 5 grass species are at risk. Animals, we see that those found in freshwater habitats are really facing the most dire risk. And in the ecosystem realm, temperate grasslands are among the most threatened, with over half known to be at risk. Understanding which threats are impacting species is really critical for taking actions to prevent further decline or promote their recovery. So the report also breaks down what those threats are using information from our biodiversity database from 2022. So these charts show which threats are most impacting plants and animals by terrestrial and freshwater categories. And you can see that invasive species is among the top threats in all cases, which is emphasizing the importance of tools like IMAP invasives, which we just discussed. So the report also asks, where do we go from here? When you look at the statistics on the decline in biodiversity, it can be a little depressing, I will admit. But I find this map as a bit of hope. It's a call to action. It shows priority areas where we can conserve unprotected and imperiled species. So it's a roadmap. This map's the result of combining the aggregated data on where we've confirmed threatened species to occur. We've looked at those confirmed locations, and we've also looked at the predicted locations from those habitat models of thousands of imperiled species. And then we've overlaid that with the USGS map of protected areas. And we arrive at these locations where we see high concentrations of unprotected biodiversity importance. So there's a global 30 by 30 initiative that calls for conservation of 30% of the planet's land and water by 2030. And in the US, that's been also called out by the administration as America the Beautiful, similar call for 30 by 30. So meeting goals for these 30 by 30 meeting these 30 by 30 goals will require maps like this that direct attention toward the places where we can maximize value for biodiversity conservation. 30% is a great goal, but it needs to be the right 30%. In our opinion, that 30% needs to really focus on biodiversity outcomes. So you might ask, how can you help? This has been a bit of a whirlwind tour, and I hope it's given you an appreciation of what it takes to be nature's tech firm. We have a talent and technology team that is dedicated to developing and maintaining solutions that cover that full life cycle from data collection to conservation, and contributions from supporters really help us rise to this challenge. You can help spread the word about NatureServe. You can consider our Adopt a Species program, which is something that I have enjoyed doing. And you can stay connected with us on your favorite social media channels. If you haven't listened, I encourage you to check out Conservation Conversations. That's always a tongue twister with Sean O'Brien. That's our podcast. And I am open to taking your questions, and I'm also open to doing any kind of custom demos that might be of interest. I wanted to thank the folks in the network. I wanted to thank them so much. I adopted the hellbender, as you can see here, one of my favorite species, to honor the NatureServe network of biodiversity scientists. So I encourage you to check out other species that have been adopted on Explore and the tools that I showed today. So with that, we'll see if there's questions or if some might have come in on the chat while we were talking.
Thank you so much, Lori. Yes, we do have some questions. So Betsy had a question I'll just put out for her. And the question is, in NatureServe Pro, do you have estimates of how much time has been spent in each cell or hexagon in terms of surveying by the biologist?
Oh, so an estimate of effort indicated of whether I see. That's a really good question. I can pretty definitively say we do not have information like that exposed through Explorer Pro today in that cell. But a classic phrase we use in the NatureServe network is absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So it's a very good question in terms of understanding whether if more information about the level of effort that's been directed to survey in an area can be an indicator of how hard you looked, and if that absence really indicates something's not there. I guess I would say that as we bring more of these habitat models online, that will really help increase the confidence of where absence really is absence, because it's going to be filling in that white space of where we've surveyed with these predictions that are really can be very accurate, and the score will tell you what confidence we have in the model and will indicate what kind of likelihood there is for the species being there, even if we haven't confirmed it with a direct field survey.
Thank you, Lori. And we have another question from Jason. Jason's asking, what's involved to get new states onboarded into the IMAP invasives network? How big is the lift to get data integrated into the system if it's been tracked using some other type of data system?
Okay, great question. Thanks, Jason. So we have great bulk load import tools. And when I was on the IMAP slide, you might have noticed that was one of the larger categories of the type of data that's been loaded. So it's pretty straightforward for us to crosswalk and load data in bulk to get a state up and running in IMAP invasives. And it is not it's not that hard to get set up. We could talk to you. We know how to get in touch with you. So Shelley Cook can get in touch with you about that. And we have a lot of great resources from the other states and provinces that have already started using IMAP invasives to help a new state get started. Lots of tutorials, training videos, resources. The things that are involved are setting up your state's list for what invasive species to track. So we have a national or international list, but then each jurisdiction can narrow in on the sort of target list of invasive species that are most relevant in their geography. There's other things that we configure, like certain state-specific geographic layers that you can load into the system. Thinking through sort of the different groups you're going to engage, strategies for outreach and training of volunteers. So there's quite a number of resources. The IMAP invasives community has a really great website with all those. So just get in touch and we can give you some more detail. And also, given that there's jurisdictions nearby to Maryland that have the tool, that's a big help, because a lot of the same invasive species that they're tracking are likely relevant in your geography. So there's probably some good work from your neighbor states that can help out.
Thanks, Lori. Steve Young is interested in hearing more about our interactions with the iNaturalist group and also gbif.org.
Interactions with iNaturalist and GBIF. So we have, as a network, been interacting with iNaturalist data. It's varied. Some states are very involved and have their own projects in iNaturalist. I should say states and provinces. There's a big concerted effort in Canada, for example, to mine as much data as possible out of iNaturalist, and there's efforts in the US as well. There's a network working group on interacting with iNaturalist and trying to work as a group to improve the efficiencies of data sharing between iNaturalist and NatureServe. And that can go in the other way too. For example, iNaturalist, much like NatureServe does, we mask and generalize the locations of species that are threatened that could be harmed if the exact location were known. iNaturalist can do the same thing, and we can help them do that for the right species by sharing our conservation status ranks. And we can also help guide what citizen scientists might find through county lists and so forth. IMAP invasives, which we've been talking about, directly integrates iNaturalist data into it, and that helps bring in citizen science records that might be approaching a state, for example. So you can get alerts in IMAP invasives to say what's approaching your region, and bringing in a higher volume of data from other systems like iNaturalist. We're also working with the USGS, which has their own aquatic invasive species system, and another group called EDMAP. So we're collaborating with other tools that are collecting invasive data to make sure we can bring it all together and raise the alarm on sort of a rapid response to invasives quicker. For GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, NatureServe has historically published data to GBIF, but in a very generalized way. So at a county, US county scale. We want to update the data that is representing NatureServe network in GBIF and take advantage of the ways we're publishing the data on Explorer Pro now. So we have a plan to do that as soon as we can, basically. It's sort of in the queue to update and refresh on a regular basis that public scale data into GBIF at the scale that our network partners agree is safe to share with everyone publicly. And that'll raise awareness of NatureServe network data and get it into the global pool of all the other data that you can discover in GBIF. And if you had a more specific question that I didn't answer, Steve, just type it in.
Thanks, Lori. We have a question also from George Garrick. who says you've given an excellent presentation, and thank you, and is asking a question that says, from a layperson's perspective, it's not totally clear how SGINs are represented.
So George, is SGIN, does that mean SGCN, species of greatest conservation need? I'm not familiar with the term SGIN, but I'm wondering if that was just a typo. Information need, species of greatest, I guess I'm just not sure what that term means. I'm sorry. SGIN. I'm apologizing. Yeah, if you want to. Are you unmuted?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I live in Idaho, and I was looking over the Idaho's SWOT, and it listed species of greatest conservation need and species of greatest information need.
Ah.
So it seems like, those are the species that you don't have enough observations of to be able to determine their conservation status. So, for example, just looking at your map, looking at North Idaho, it doesn't seem like there are very many species that are endangered or threatened. But looking at the S3 species, there's a number of them that seem,
right,
right on the edge of being tipped into the S1 and S2 category. And so I don't know. Again, I'm a layperson, and I don't know enough really to even formulate an intelligent question. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I just hadn't been familiar with that that term. So yeah, so in the state wildlife action plans, which are required by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for state agencies, state wildlife agencies, there's this term species of greatest conservation need that can be often overlap with species that NatureServe network ranks as on the more threatened end of imperilment, but it could also be other species important to the state for hunting, fishing, you name it. And then species, I guess, of information need or inventory need, we may have not enough data. So for sure, you've hit on an area where I noted how NatureServe and our network partners often focus on more threatened and endangered species. So as you go from the G1 down to G2, 3, 4, 5, we tend to have the most information on things at the G1 and G2 end of the spectrum, and to some extent G3, but not extensively. And it can really vary on how much capacity the program in the state or the province has, how much capacity they've had to take on inventory and tracking of species at that level. So it's for sure an issue of not having enough data, not having enough inventory in some places, in those cases. I will also say in Idaho, I think you said where you are, I mean, we're working to bring in more data from some of our states that might be tracking the data in different ways. We are starting to bring in observation data where we might be able to bring in more data on those G3 species that might be in the wildlife agency but aren't currently exchanged with NatureServe. So we're really at a point where we can open up the sort of receptors to bring in more of these data that have been quality controlled and vetted through our partners. So we want to keep a sort of level of quality in the data we share, but make sure we can have as much information available to inform what's going on at a place. So it's a really key question, and I appreciate it. And I think you're right to recognize that there's probably more data in the map, or there should be more data in the map than we might have in some places. I guess I'll also just mention the habitat modeling effort that we're doing is another way to help with that, those data deficient or data need areas, because if at the scale that we're modeling species, we've done a lot of the G1 and G2 species. We'd love to tackle the G3 species next, So that can really help fill in the white space of where we're incomplete in terms of surveys for those species.
And Julie had a comment. Julie, I don't know if you want to come off of mute and just and make your comment. And if not, I'm happy to pass that on to Lori. Let me give you a second to come off mute if you'd like to say it yourself.
There we go. Can you hear me?
We
Yep,
can.
Julie.
Yeah, so iNaturalist, we have been using it quite a bit at New York Natural Heritage Program. And we've specifically been using it for some of the projects we're leading, like the pollinator project, and soon to come a firefly survey. But we talked a lot about, and we are on the working group for using iNat. There's so much information there. But one of the biggest problems is that even things that are tagged as research grade include a lot of records that are incorrectly identified. And so you have to really look at each one or a set of them to make sure they're vetted and accurate. But that's something that's been in discussion with iNat and a known issue. And I know people are working on improving that, but it is a fantastic resource. And it's gotten so many people interested and aware of the diversity out there. So it's exciting. So
yeah, it's a great education resource, and our network of experts is playing a big role in helping add those expert IDs, which can help give the feedback to the original submitter to help them understand better what they saw if they aren't sure what it was. And yeah, I agree. There's you can't automatically accept all of that data as accurate, but it's a great resource, and at scale, at volume, with the tools they've brought on, including using AI to help identify species, that can be a real help. There's a lot of potential there. So I understand the caution. And yeah, I don't think we'll just open it up for all data, but we want to work with the network on what's the appropriate way to bring in vetted, curated subsets of that data to help provide the most complete picture on what exists out there.
They're all the questions we had in the chat, but let's, we have a few more minutes, about 10 more minutes we can spend together. So if anyone wants to just simply unmute and either make a comment or a question to Lori, that would be great.
I see Bill's comment about Maryland Biodiversity Project. Thanks for spelling that out. Using the iNaturalist API to create customized ingestion of the data, including a custom expert list versus research grade. So that sounds like, yeah, we actually have some meetings teed up to talk about how to best take advantage of some of these tools and share some of the techniques that one program has developed to the other programs. That's really a great asset of being part of this network, is so much innovation bubbles up, and then we can share it across the network. And that's a great way to improve technology by working together and bringing our innovations together. And Steve said there might be, the iNaturalists might want to consider a higher level of research grade where real experts have weighed in. So maybe there's a NatureServe iNaturalist, NatureServe network iNaturalist super research grade we could get to there. Good idea. Dangerously subjective, yeah. Well,
Go ahead.
Oh, Jeanette's just reminding everyone, you're welcome to unmute if you have anything you wanted to say versus chat in our last few minutes.
Actually, a little bit different in detail. If you'd like to chat, just pop it in the chat function and I can unmute you and you can ask your questions live. So just make yourself known in the chat function. I'm happy to officially allow permission. Sounds so official, but just allow you to use your voice, which is great.
Thanks. Sorry, I misread that.
Jeanette. Great. I think we may have a wrap. So thank you to everyone who has attended today. We're so happy to see you always, and at any time to answer any specific questions or general questions about what you saw today, you can reach out to Lori Scott. You can reach out to me, Karen Fernandez. And if you are interested in having a specific presentation on some of these tools for a group, as some of the folks in the chat have mentioned, we are more than happy to do that. And I put my email in the chat, but again, you can reach out to either me or to Lori to get that set up, and we'll be in touch with you to do so. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.